Welcome to ARC's Supernova 2023. Tonight's 4 roundtable discussions feature our outstanding scholars in interactive conversations with distinguished moderators. While these scholars are not necessarily experts on these roundtable subjects, they come from a variety of scientific fields, and each one has conducted thoughtful research on these topics in preparation for tonight. Following the discussion, there will be time for Q&A. After the roundtable, please visit the scholars' posters, which are displayed all around the University Club. These posters are a fascinating sketch of each scholar's field of study. Now, thank you for joining us at the ARC's Roundtable on Artificial Intelligence, Emerging Science. Please welcome our moderators, Rashmi MISRA, GM, AI and Emerging Technologies, Business Development, Microsoft, and our scholar panelists, Katarina Wojcik, Biomolecular Engineering, UC Santa Cruz, Lika Patil, Mathematics, San Francisco State University, Manuela RICHTER, Cell Biology, UC San Francisco, and Micah SWANN, Civil and Environmental Engineering, UC Santa Cruz.
Welcome to this very cozy setting, but isn't it amazing? It's almost like Harry Potter-esque, isn't it, actually? It's very, very nice. So Sarisha can't join us in person today, and I don't think she's yet on the Zoom either, right? Am I right? If she comes and joins us, it will be another sort of impromptu turn-up. I know that she's hoping to join us, so apologies for that. We have 4 really amazing panelists here, and I'm sure you will agree by the time you've heard them. I'd really like for each of them to go through a little bit, describe maybe a little bit about themselves, and let you know what they've been working on as well. Can we start with you, Lika?
Hi. Is my mic on? Oh, it is. Okay, awesome. Hi, I'm Leica. I am at San Francisco State. I am a second-year master's student in mathematics, and I am currently studying fractals and their projections. When you think of fractals, you can think of shrinking, repeating patterns like a snowflake or blood vessels. And I'm really excited in the way that AI might be able to improve the way that we write proofs and make mathematical discoveries.
Oh, hello. Hi, my name is Kate. I'm a bioinformatics PhD student at UC Santa Cruz, and my area of research is more into neuroscience. In our lab, we look at 3D stem cell-derived models of the brain, which we call cortical organoids. They're cortical organoids because they model from stem cells. We can grow them and model a specific portion of the human brain that, in our case, we're interested in the cortex. So my area of interest is looking at the neurodevelopment of the cortex in vitro, in a dish, and specifically looking at the neural activity that comes during development of the cortex, and how that neural activity changes over time, and how we could potentially use these cortical organoids as a way to study how the brain functions and how learning works within the brain, and through interaction with these cortical organoids, how we could change the activity of the neurons and learn something about how the brain learns.
And maybe I forgot to add on to this, but maybe you could also talk about any AI that you use today in your research as well.
Definitely. So there's a lot of AI used in bioinformatics, but in the case of looking at electrical signals from the neurons, we're interested in seeing whether those signals in the data are noise or if there are actual neural spikes, and we can use machine learning to allow us to understand what is a real neural firing event and what is most likely noise. And also looking at how these networks develop over time using various statistical methods like cross-correlation to see which neurons are more likely to be connected together.
And I'll go back to you on that question as well. The AI that you use, what's fresh in people's minds?
So we don't actually use AI currently in our research, but I do hope to see how AI is used in mathematical research in the future, both theoretically and applied mathematics, because there's just a lot of really exciting possibilities.
Thank you. Manuela.
Hello, my name is Manuela RICHTER. I am a sixth-year PhD student at UCSF studying cell biology. My research focuses on cell division, specifically how do cells perfectly segregate their genetic material every time they divide. Results in, so missegregations can result in cancers, developmental defects, or cell death. So how do cells ensure that this process happens perfectly? They actually build this very robust machine that attaches to DNA and then physically pulls it apart into the two new daughter cells. And I study how this machine is built. To do this, I rely on a lot of microscopy, a lot of imaging, and AI has become a very helpful tool to help with this image analysis. It's really relieved me of a lot of grunt work of having to manually track things. So it's been very good to have a system that can be trained to spot patterns, maybe even better than a human can, and do it much more quickly than a human can.
Hi, I'm Micah SWANN. I'm a fifth-year PhD candidate at UC Davis, not UC Santa Cruz, in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. I study limnology, which is the study of inland waters, particularly lakes. And for my research, I combine high-frequency measurements of temperature and oxygen to build one-dimensional and three-dimensional models of lakes, and then test how they will change in the future with watershed and climate change scenarios. There are kind of two applications that I'm really excited about AI in improving the future of limnological research. One about how we can improve our observations, and one about how we can improve our modeling. Historically, the way that we take measurements of lakes is that we deploy stationary instruments measuring the temperature or the oxygen or the velocity of the water in one point in time and space. Unfortunately, there's a lot of heterogeneity in a lake, and so these instruments are expensive, and so it's really hard to really capture that full diversity of how much is really changing in a lake system. We're now moving into using autonomous underwater vehicles, which have smart sensors, excuse me, which can actually move throughout the lake, capturing a whole range of different environmental phenomenon. And so we can kind of better target the things that we're trying to observe. In terms of modeling, all models are wrong. Some are useful. Our models are basically mathematical equations that we then use parameters to kind of parameterize the complexity of the world. And I spend a lot of my time trying to tweak those parameters to get the best approximation of what we're seeing in our observations. AI and machine learning has the ability to do all of that grunt work for me and really fine-tune those different parameter choices. And so instead of spending weeks or months to come up with the best model possible, we can do it in a matter of hours.
Great, thank you. Really interesting topics and interesting people as well. So let me explain what I do as well. So Rashmi MISRA, I head the business development for AI and emerging technologies for Microsoft. And today that covers everything we do in terms of partnerships for AI and our AI platforms and services, including some of which you may know about as well. I've been on that particular journey since our first partnership with OpenAI since 2019, which has been a very interesting trajectory, actually. And also in the emerging technologies, all our immersive technologies, so mixed reality, AR, VR, our autonomous systems and autonomous transport, and what we do for metaverse in terms of the consumer, industrial, and enterprise metaverse, as well as Web3. And it may seem a strange sort of hodgepodge list of stuff, but you could almost thread a needle through almost all of them and see how they'll be connected in the near future, if not already. So a topic very close to my heart. I was saying, I think in the earlier panel, that when I did my PhD, it was in multi-agent reasoning systems, but at that time, certainly all the AI, I guess all the AI researchers were in the dungeon in my university without windows. And yes, we weren't the sort of, I think the question my sister asked me at some point is, what are you going to do for a job? Okay, so fast forward, we're at a very different place, I think, and a very exciting time, as well as one that we look at in a sort of cautious, optimistic way as well, with all the sort of responsibility ahead with us. And I'm sure all these researchers are looking at it in the same way as well. This particular panel is about the emerging science around AI, both in terms of what we're applying it to, but the emerging science around AI itself as well. And when I look at this space as to, well, what changed very recently? Very recently we've got a view on generative AI, and especially large language models, where I guess differently from some of the AI that's already existed, and there's lots of other AI apart from generative AI, which actually has been able to action and reason on data and then create some output. What we're now able to have is these models that are able to create a new output and generate new data sets as well. And so that puts us in a very different environment that actually gives us exciting new possibilities and new application spaces as well. And that's, I guess, some of the inspiration behind what our panelists will talk about today. I guess that's probably a good place for us to start. If you look at these different industries and different application areas, what excites you most today in terms of A, the application area, and B, the sort of the technology behind it? Can I start with you, Kate? I'm going to mix it up a bit here.
Definitely. So coming from a bioinformatics background, I would say what excites me a lot with respect to bioinformatics is personalized medicine. I think having more data that doctors can capture about a person's biomarkers. Biomarkers are essentially any measurable protein or maybe a vitamin or mineral that you might have, or gene expression, like snippets of RNA, or even your genome, so looking at your DNA, what is your genome and how do your genes contribute to your health profile in currently or in the next 10 years and in the next 20 years. So taking more data about a person's blood samples, looking at their gene expression now, and seeing differences next year, for example, when they go for their health checkup, how did their gene expression look now versus a year ago, and where is their health trajectory going? For example, can you detect cancer earlier by doing more screens, or can you detect it at more starting stages as opposed to later stages through continuous monitoring? And can we use AI and these algorithms to be able to sift through all of this data in order to make models? And as you were saying, models are never perfect, but make models that are useful for highlighting which data we should pay attention to, because we only have so much time and so much attention. It's great to be able to automate data analysis and understand which aspects of the data can show problems down the line in a person's health, and which aspects we should pay attention to now. So personalized medicine is definitely something I'm looking forward to.
Thank you. Leica?
Something that I'm really excited about is, as you may or may not know, but there are a lot of open problems in mathematics, a lot of conjectures that are yet to be proven or disproven. And with AI, we can create strategies to construct counterexamples to disprove these conjectures. So what I mean by that is, if we have a conjecture, we have certain hypotheses, certain statements that must be true, and then using AI as almost like teaching it as if it were a game, can you construct an example that follows these rules but still creates our end product? We're able to come up with many, many examples, and if it's false, eventually a counterexample, and work that would have taken years might only take a few weeks, which, it's still way in the future, but I think that that's something that will be so exciting, and we will really be able to increase the speed of math research, which, as you know, if you've maybe done some long division recently, can take quite a while.
Micah?
On a personal level, I've been really excited and really trying to use it in my own research to help me with the writing process and the peer-reviewed literature research process. It can take weeks to find the exact paper that you're looking for, the that you need to cite to prove a certain point. Or I can work on the same page over and over again. As an engineer, I love working with equations and math, but when it comes to writing it up and into a paragraph, it's a whole nother ballgame. And so having that tool to help me iteratively work through the writing process, but also sift through the myriad, the thousands of peer-reviewed articles that are available online and find the ones that are most germane to my own research has been really useful and exciting in the last few months.
So I think there are two big applications in biology that I'm especially excited about. The first is AI in drug discovery. There have been absolutely revolutionary algorithms that can now predict protein structure, can predict protein folding. Why is this so exciting? So previously, to understand the structure of a protein, you typically have to freeze it and then use really fancy microscopes to look at it. And that takes a very long time to do, years. But with these algorithms, you can predict what a protein will look like in its folded state. And why is this so helpful for drug discovery in particular? If you have a target that you want to develop a drug against, you can use this predictive software to know what that target looks like and then develop therapeutics against it. And it can help you, for example, design a drug that will bind better into the binding pocket of your target. So in that sense, AI is completely revolutionizing protein structure and, in turn, drug discovery. And the other application that I wanted to talk about is something that Kate kind of alluded to, is AI is a potential diagnostic tool. If we can train a computer to look at, for example, healthy cells versus diseased cells, sometimes the machine can pick up on trends and patterns that we can't see. And on one hand, that's a little terrifying, what is this machine seeing that we're not? But on the other hand, it is a very potentially powerful tool to help with diagnostics. And I'm not suggesting that it replaces any medical opinion, but it can be another tool in our toolbox for diagnostics.
Really important points and very good applications. And I do agree with you about the not replacing expert opinion. I do want to add a tiny little question onto each one of that, which is, okay, so when can I see those, in your opinion, in daily life? But I'll come back to that because I also want to just maybe talk about, all of these are really exciting applications. And I have a couple. So maybe I'll go through them really quickly. But there's two that really top of mind for me. So one, certainly a customer partner that I'm working with who is dealing with a lack of resources, skilled human resources in certain environments. And as we look at the models today, certainly the large language models, which primarily deal with text, but we're soon coming to a world where these are going to be dealing with music, with videos, with and we then get into other modes, so multimodal models, and that's where the whole next surface area of autonomous systems comes, and robotics and automation in the world of manufacturing and other areas become really interesting to me, especially when you're dealing with places where the workforce is limited, not able to cater for the skilled workforce, but also the ones with the most, the next generation not wanting to be where the factories are, for example. And increasingly, in a sustainable environment, we all want a batch of one where we've designed something and it's built close to us. So a lot of these partners are having to be much more agile in a heterogeneous environment, and they're seeing in an environment where there are things like remote robotics, things that have been trained on hours and hours of video that's maybe done pick and place of certain things that go on in a manufacturing environment, but now can be automated for safety and other sort of efficiency criteria as well. So that's certainly one area that's certainly interesting for me. The other one is when I see the excitement in somebody's face who's written code for the first time, somebody not trained to write code or to program, but suddenly they're in control of something they want to create, an application or and of course some of this is available today through the Copilot application that you can get on GitHub, but being able to use something like natural language to create an application when you've never actually programmed is to me a life-changing, game-changing environment that opens out that landscape to a whole lot of other people. So I'm deeply excited by that one as well. Now, coming back to the topic on when you think this will be available in our daily lives, I guess. Let me start with you, Kate.
Sure. I would say it's available right now. The question is the cost. So if you think about the Human Genome Project, it started off being a countrywide effort with lots of federal funding to allow us to sequence one human genome. But over time, we were able, maybe 10 years ago, we were thinking about the $1,000 genome, or maybe 5 years ago, we were thinking about $1,000 genome. Now we're talking about $500 or $200 genome. So I think when it comes down to decreasing cost, we're going to see wider adoption and more accessibility. And that will allow us to have more people be able to access that technology and use it regularly to check up on their health. So in terms of genomics as an example, but looking at RNA sequencing or blood panels or more automated analysis of the data, I think the current developments in AI will help speed up the ability to interpret data, and also the decreasing cost of sequencing and doing analysis in blood panels will, and also, for example, wearables. Right now, they're becoming less expensive and more popularized, and being able to track one's health with such wearables could also allow for greater personalized medicine. So I think it is coming. It's just decreasing in cost, and once it decreases, there's going to be a wider adoption.
Very interesting. Thank you. Leka?
So I would say that it is available in some research fields, but not in all of them yet, and it's not as widely available as I hope it will be one day. For example, there have been some recent developments in certain combinatorial problems, combinatorics being the way that we count different objects. And there's been some really exciting developments in having AI help construct certain counterexamples and disproving conjectures, which is very exciting, as well as providing proofs for already known theorems. So a nice way for the researchers to double check that their model is actually working. It seems so far, though, that a lot of the success has been in a particular subfield called discrete math, which is very focused on discrete objects. I think that it'll be some more time before there's more work in more continuous spaces, as well as just being able to automate proofs altogether. I think that there is an element of mathematical writing and proofs that will always need a sort of human touch. So maybe never, but I think that it'll definitely be there to aid us more as time goes on.
Micah?
I think it's already there in engineering and environmental research. We're using such large, big data sets now, whether it's the data that we're collecting or the global climate models that we're using to predict climate change across the planet over the course of the next century, that we just can't go through it with a fine-tooth comb manually with a person reviewing that data set. And that we really need AI and machine learning and neural networks to go through this large, incomprehensible amount of data and to find the meaningful patterns there. I think it's the large language models that we've all become really excited about over the last few months because we can interact with them on such a personal, easily user level. And for me personally, I now use those large language models rather than going to a search engine to answer a question. And it's just been a switch. And it's been really easy for that change for me.
And before I go to Manuela, I do want to ask the audience if there are any questions. I'll come directly to you in a minute. You're next, and then anybody else who's got one as well. Manuela.
I agree with what's been said. I think we are already surrounded by AI. A lot of science has been relying on machine learning and an AI for so long already, and I think it's more recently come to the forefront of our minds and more mainstream because of these more accessible AI options, such as ChatGPT or AI art generators. So now that it's more accessible, more open to the public, we can start discussing its implications a bit better.
Thank you. Try and traipse over here. Can I reach over?
So Micah, tell us about the future of quantum computing and climate change. There's a program called Q4C. Please tell us about it.
I unfortunately don't have any background or expertise on that, so I wish I could answer your question, but I just don't have any insight into quantum computing.
Does anybody else want to take that? Otherwise, I'll have one comment on it. Okay. All right. So I think I said to you, sir, downstairs in the panel below that I certainly think there's a juxtaposition between quantum AI and certainly for big, large projects and problems such as climate change, for example, where there's multiple variables, multiple surface areas, and just a colossal amount of ever-changing data, where the power that's provided by quantum with the smarts provided by AI is just going to be a way for us to do, I guess, address problems that are going to need things like multivariate optimization, simulated annealing, places where you're looking for optimum across different surfaces. So I'm super excited by that, and perhaps next time we need a panel on quantum. Yes.
By quantum amount. Nobody can hear you online.
I'm going to reach over again, sorry.
Is going to save a quantum amount of energy in a computing process. Whenever you go on a crypto line, the gas, the energy that you use will be quantum fold in terms of economy. That's a consideration.
Really interesting topics. Thank you very much. Let me lean over here as well.
I just wanted to comment that one of the projects here that I saw and was talking to the presenter is on that subject of trying to reduce the amount of energy for things like data mining and crypto. So there is someone here working on that exact thing.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, some really good comments here in terms of quantum and the energy components. So let me, I have another question for you guys. So when shouldn't we be using AI in terms of the emerging side of your projects? Are there any areas where you've thought, I'm not going to go there?
I certainly think that whatever proofwriting there is right now, we can use it to maybe get a rough draft. You should definitely not submit it to the journal. You should definitely proofread it before anything like that happens.
I agree. To build off of that, I think a lot of scientific journals have actually banned the use of citing ChatGPT as an author. So that's one avenue that you can take. I forgot my other point. I think in science, the peer review process is still extremely important. So while something like ChatGPT can create a seemingly true-sounding statement, there's often a lot of logical fallacies that would hopefully be picked up on by the peer review process. So you still need that human element of going through it and checking to make sure that what it wrote is not just spurious, that it's actually truthful and making good claims.
I second both opinions, and also I want to add that I'm always for being able to use the most amount of resources, the most amount of technology in order to tackle a problem or tackle a task. I think it's practical to do that, but also to echo both comments. For example, in my daily research, I write a lot of code, and I like using Copilot a lot. But I would never blindly accept code from Copilot without double checking it. I think for two reasons. One of them being that sometimes, so I found Copilot useful for some things and not very useful for other things. For some things, Copilot can almost autocomplete what I'm trying to write in terms of my code. A lot of code happens to be repetitive or have a certain syntactical structure that you just have to type out. So being able to press tab and autocomplete what I was already thinking gives a massive accelerator into the amount of code that I can write in a day. But I would say my experience with Copilot, there were things that it would suggest me that look correct, but actually have a very subtle nuance in them that would create an error that would be very hard to find afterward. So it looks correct because it's looking for patterns, looking for sequences in your code and trying to autocomplete what you think you might want to write. But sometimes it actually ends up writing something that isn't quite exactly that. And with code, you have to be very precise. So I never accept anything that Copilot gives me before reading it and understanding that that's exactly what I want.
Really important points, actually. And I guess that's why it's called Copilot as opposed to autopilot, because we have the human in there actually providing the expertise, which is brilliant. And to that point, is there anybody else on this panel that's sort of, been grappling with, well, how do I make my use of AI in my project more explainable, more transparent, more explicit? What sort of things have you used?
Well, something I've been thinking a lot about is, a lot of these models are black boxes where we can't actually see the logic that, we put in a training data set and then it outputs a result of a meaningful relationship between these different parameters. That's hard to, when you're publishing that in a peer-reviewed article, not being able to explain your logic or your methodology is a real challenge for somebody able to reproduce that work. And so one thing that I think is really important is figuring out ways that we can visualize the logic of these different systems, whether it's Bayesian networks or decision trees, creating a way that a layperson can understand and visualize what are the steps that an AI tool is going through to come up to the end result. And so I think that's a really important, interesting way of trying to make these more accessible to the general public.
So a way to actually show how the parameters came out with those output from the model. Graphically, maybe.
Graphically.
Okay, very nice. Okay, thank you. Anybody else that sort of toiled with the how do I make this more explicit?
I can address this a little bit. So I've typically relied on software that has machine learning built into it. And I would just cite the software that I used and not necessarily talk about the exact neural network behind it. So this has made me realize that maybe there has to be a better way to make this reproducible. Just saying that, I use this software, this machine learning tool, but not saying the exact steps that you used it or how you used it, what classifiers you used.
Ooh. Illumio. Sorry. I thought if it's Harry Potter, we should use a spell. Yay, it worked! Sorry.
So I guess my point is that maybe there needs to be more transparency with how machine learning and AI is being used.
Very interesting. Thank you. What about the audience? I think the lights being on and off must have woken us all up by now. What do you think? Yes, let me come over there.
One of the important things when developing a machine learning algorithm is, what data you're putting in and how you're training it and what your ground truth is. So how have you determined your ground truth for the algorithms that you're using?
Thank you. Leka, let's start with you there. Ground truth.
So I will often use just so I do math research, so I imagine I would just use the hypotheses in my conjecture that I'm trying to state or disprove or prove or anything like that. I do think that this is something that I at least feel like I should be more mindful of, because oftentimes math, we treat it like it's this purely objective thing, as though we don't have our own biases going into any of it and how we state our problems. So all that to say, I don't know that I have a really great answer, but I think that that is something that I want to be more mindful of, so thank you for bringing it up.
Thank you.
I second the question. I agree that our models are sometimes only as good as the data that we feed them. And the way that we address this in our daily work in the lab would be, for example, to have multiple people agree on a certain piece of data, agree that it is a certain has a certain identity or a certain outcome, and multiple people have to agree on that label to the data before we use that to train a machine learning algorithm. Another way that the problem could be approached is to feed the algorithm all of the possible data that we can collect, and then look at how the machine learning algorithm separates that data or clusters that data, and then based on how it clusters that data, then see if that's that subdivision and that categorization is something that summarizes reality really well or not. So having maybe not just doing one pass where we feed data to a model, train the model, and then have an output, and that's it, but training the model and then seeing how well the model performs according to our expectations, and then saying, okay, we need to go back to improving the model. So having multiple passes, I think, is also important in developing a good model.
I can piggyback off of that and talk about this from the angle of image analysis. So when I do AI machine learning to segment things, at its simplest, I basically tell the machine, this is a cell, or this is a feature of interest, or this is not. And it can be as simple as me taking like a paintbrush, drawing it over a cell, and telling the machine, this is a cell. And then I take a paintbrush, draw it over a background area, and tell the machine, this is not a cell. And that's sufficient to train a data set. But of course, you still need to validate this. You need to run that algorithm that you've generated on other data sets to make sure that it still accurately can read what is a cell, what is a feature of interest, and what is not.
One point I just want to make to kind of piggyback off of what Manuela and Katerina said is that all data sets have inherent bias in them. It's whether it's the person who's picking the data or the data itself. I think it's something to be conscious and aware of, and that we really just need to make our truthing data sets as diverse as possible, and be aware that just by choosing data, we're introducing some bias into that.
Really good points. I guess the other part that I'd add in there is, being able to have a diverse set of people actually addressing the problem itself. Not always possible when you're doing research on your own, I grant it, but certainly when we're looking at things like products and how they come alive, making sure that a diverse set of people are able to be part of that product creation, testing, that there's an agile environment such that not only can you have some basic principles where you want to avoid bias, harmful scenarios and non-safe scenarios as well, but also to be able to come back and say, well, how am I meeting that compliance to those principles? Do those principles still hold up? Are they still the most valid ones, or do I need to add to those? And then how regularly am I able to audit it? And I guess one of those things about having humans in the loop, but also humans using this stuff now, is that we just have to be immensely agile to tune, because we're never going to the point of all the researchers here, we're never going to be 100% right. We can be as close as we can get today in the moment.
If I can add a quick comment,
Yes.
I think we're bumping also into the question of what is truth. And that's a very deeply philosophical question. And I think we're figuring that out for ourselves all the time, but also we're feeding data to models, and the models are also telling us what is truth and what is not truth. And I think it's not about whether that model is good or whether what is our truth, but it's in the process of us discovering our truth continuously and using machine learning to show some aspects of the data that might reveal different angles on the problem that we may not have realized. So I think it's discovering a truth together with AI, with data science, I think is the general
truth together
trend.
with AI. I love that. Now we're 3 minutes away from that, and I wanted to give the researchers a possibility to really summarize what excites them most today. But I also want them to tell us what would they tell somebody embarking on their project new today. So a new PhD student, a new master's student. What advice would you give them in this sort of moment of rapidly changing AI? Micah, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I'm just really excited about the fact that we now have the potential to collect a huge amount of data and interpret that to make reason of the complexities of our world, whether it's the environment today or the future that we're projecting with climate change. We now have the tools to really start interrogating them at a really complex level. And what I would tell someone who's just starting today is, spend the time up front to figure out how you can get AI to do all the grunt work for you, to do all of the nitty-gritty, and then you can spend your time thinking and doing the critical challenges that's really exciting about grad school.
I totally agree with that. Using AI to take out all the grunt work, all the boring parts, all the repetitive clicking on things, that for sure would be my advice. But also to have fun with it, to play with it. There's a lot of aspects of ChatGPT or AI art generators that are just very fun to play with, and to see what kind of things you can get out of prompts. So I would tell even kids to play around with it, and maybe that will spark some curiosity in machine learning and AI.
So I would say two things. Firstly is checking different sources. So looking at using all the resources that are available to you and looking at what does ChatGPT tell you, what does Bing AI tell you, what does Google search tell you, what does another search tell you, what does going for a search in a library tell you. Look at all those sources and create a picture that's more full than just checking any one of those sources. Use all of them available to you and to their maximum potential. And then the second comment that I would have for an incoming student is to look into computer science, even if you aren't going to be a computer scientist. Learning how computers work, learning some basic coding, learning some basic things of how things work in a computer within a machine learning model would create much more understanding and much more confidence and much more critical thinking about what is this AI that we're using, what is its limitations, what can it do, what can it not do, what are we overhyping, or what is actually a threat to us. So understanding the technical aspects to a general degree of what someone is working with when they're using ChatGPT or Google or any of these resources, I think is very important.
I think that something that's really exciting to me is that with AI and math is that we can become a lot more creative in how we approach our proofs because we're not wasting so much time, or we're not so worried about wasting time on a dead-end path. We can try it, let the computer do the work, see if it's a reasonable path to follow. And my advice would be to definitely ask your advisor where your school's computing center is because I have crashed my laptop.
Oh my goodness, ladies and gentlemen, I think you will agree with me. This is amazing. This talent that's coming up the pipeline is really exciting and amazing, and I think that we're in safe hands if AI is going to be applied to amazing problems as well. So thank you very much. I'm sorry I didn't get to all the questions, by the way.